this week's video tutorial, I have a really fun cake design that would work as a Valentine's Day cake or even a birthday cake. So I'm going to be showing you how you can make your cake look like a box of chocolates. Okay, let's get started. So the first thing that I need to do is actually bake my cakes. So I'm going to be making some square cakes, and to do this I'm going to be using my Silverwood square cake tin. Now this cake tin comes with the base, and then you have extra panels that you can use to split your tin depending on the size of the cakes you want to create. So you could create one large square cake which is 12 inches by 12 inches. I'm going to pop my center parts in, and I'm going to split this into 4 separate cakes that are 6 inches by 6 inches. Now I'm only actually going to be baking 3 of the 4 panels. I'm then going to divide in my cake mixture, and I'm just using a chocolate cake mixture. Once those cakes have baked, I can then let these cool, and I've got the 3 layers which I'm going to be using for my cake. Once my cakes were cool, I wrapped them in cling film and popped them into the fridge just to make them a little bit firmer to trim down. And I'm just going to trim down the sides so that they're perfectly square. This has given me 3 layers of cake, and each layer is around 1 inch in height each. Now 2 of those layers I'm going to have together, and this is going to be the main part of my chocolate box. I've then got 1 layer which is going to be for the lid. Now I want the lid to sit on the cake at a slight angle in order to make this nice and strong, so that when it is at an angle there's not going to be any bend. I'm going to be placing my lid on a drum board. Now I've actually cut this square down from a larger drum board and just covered the sides in some tin foil so that the whole board is food safe. Now as this is a chocolate box cake, I'm just filling and covering my cake with some milk chocolate ganache, and this is going to be the main part of my cake. So I'm just layering up those 2 layers, starting by adding a crumb coat around the outside just to lock in any loose crumbs, and you just want to try it just to get nice sharp corners. I'm just starting at the corner and just pulling that scraper back towards the center of my cake. I can then pop that in the fridge just for that ganache to set. Now what will be the lid of my cake, I'm going to place some ganache onto that board, and this is going to stick down my cake, as my cake will be at an angle, so we want it to stick firmly. So I'm going to place quite a bit of ganache onto that board. I'm then going to do exactly the same and just cover this with ganache all over the outside. Now I will put a link to my chocolate ganache recipe in the description below. Once that crumb coat of ganache has firmed up, I'm going to go in and add a final layer. So I just want to make sure that the top is nice and level, and I've got nice smooth sides around the edge to give us a nice base to add our fondant. Once I'm happy with how that's looking, I'm going to pop this in the fridge and do exactly the same to the lid. For my cake to sit on, I've got quite a large drum board. So I've got a 13-inch round drum board, and this one just measures 1 centimeter in height. Now I'm going to cover this so it looks like the chocolate box is sitting on a marble surface. So I've got some white fondant and also some black fondant. I'm going to take my white and just breaking off a few pieces of the black. And if you didn't have any black fondant, you could also just add on a few little lines of black food colouring. I'm then going to start to knead this black through that white fondant, and once I can see that that grey has started to disperse through the white but it's not fully combined, I'm going to roll it out. Now I think I'm going to go for the slightly more bolder side, so I'm just going to first add some water onto my board. I can then lay my fondant over the top, smooth it down and trim off any excess. I'm then going to add a white ribbon around the side, just fixing it in place with some double-sided tape. Okay, now what chocolate box would be complete without some chocolates to go inside? So to create the chocolates, I'm going to use this small heart mold, and this is from Happy Sprinkles. So I'm going to start by tempering down some milk chocolate so that I can fill fill my molds. Okay, so I've just melted down my milk chocolate in the microwave for 3 intervals of 30 seconds, just checking the temperature each time. Once the milk chocolate reaches between 45 and 50 degrees Celsius, I'm then gonna take it out, and I wanna bring the temperature down to between 28 and 30. So I've got some unmelted chocolate that I just kept to one side. So you wanna keep about 1/3 of your chocolate unmelted, and I'm just gonna add that a block at a time, mixing that through and checking the temperature, just waiting for that chocolate to cool down. Once it's reached that temperature, the chocolate is then tempered and we can add it into our mold. Now, the reasons that you want to temper chocolate is if you don't temper chocolate, the chocolate can get little white dots when it hardens. Also, without tempering, it does remain slightly soft and you get quite a matte finish on the surface. Once they've been in the fridge and those chocolates have hardened, I'm gonna push them out of my mold and we get these really sweet little heart chocolates. So now we've got our little chocolate hearts. I want to decorate them with some sprinkles. Now, these are just some of the sprinkles from the Happy Sprinkles Valentine's range. We've got these strands. These are just called love strands. And we've got different shades of little pink strands, so these are going to be perfect on my chocolates. We've then got some of their mixes, so these are the Be Mine sprinkles. One of my favorites, which you've probably seen me use in a few of my videos, are the Princess Diary sprinkles. So we've just got pinks and golds, so depending on the theme that you want your chocolate box. We've then got one of my favorites, and this is a new one that I hadn't seen before, and this is called Lovebirds. So we've just got these really pretty pastel pink and white sprinkle mix. Now, there are many more sprinkle mixes in the Happy Sprinkles at Valentine's range, so make sure you head over to their website to check those out. And I do have a 10% off discount code that you can use on all the Happy Sprinkles sprinkle mixes on their website and on the website of the cake decorating company. All you have to do is enter HappyLinz10 at the checkout, and I will leave all the details in the description below. Now, with the remainder of my chocolate, I re-tempered this down in exactly the same way, and I've popped this into a new piping bag. Now I'm just going to snip off a really small opening at the end. I'm then going to use this on my chocolates, just going back and forward on one of those corners before adding some sprinkles. We then have a selection of our chocolates which we can use to add onto our cake. Now, I have actually made one additional little heart. The mold gives you 15 hearts, but so that I can have 4 rows of 4, I've made one additional heart to give me 16. So I'm just gonna leave these to one side until they're ready to add onto the cake. Okay, so I've taken the main part of my cake out of the fridge. So I'm gonna do the center of my chocolate box in white, and then we're gonna have pink around the outside. Because my ganache has set, I've just got some water with a small amount of icing sugar, and I'm just gonna pop that over the top, just so my fondant has something to stick onto. I can then roll my fondant out, and I want this around 5mm in thickness. So that it's not draping over the edge, I'm gonna cut this out just so it's slightly bigger than the top. You then wanna place it down and smooth it out. I'm gonna use the edge of my cake as a guide to trim that off. To cover the sides of my cake in the pink fondant, I'm actually gonna do this in panels. So I'm gonna start by measuring the sides of my cake. For the height, I'm just gonna add on one of those chocolates, and I want the side of my box to come up to the same height as the top of the chocolates. So I need to cut out 4 separate panels. Now I'm gonna roll my fondant out until it's around 5mm in thickness, and I can then go in and I'm just gonna use my ruler and my craft knife just to measure out my panels and then go in with my pizza cutter. Now before I add these onto the cake, I'm gonna leave them for around half an hour just to firm up slightly. This way, because that fondant is coming slightly higher than the cake, it will start to hold its shape. Now I'm actually using quite a firm fondant to start with. So this is the sugar paste from the cake decorating company. Now I will put a link in the description below to all the recipes, the materials and the tools that I've been using in today's video. Okay, so after half an hour they are still soft, but they're a little firmer than they were when we first rolled them out. So I'm going to apply each of my panels to the side of my cake. So I'm just using my paddle smoother to smooth that down and just applying some of that glue just down the edge to join those panels together. I'm then going to start on the lid of my chocolate box. So I don't want you to be able to see the cake board underneath. So I'm going to cover this with some white fondant. So I'm just going to roll this out until it's large enough for my cake to sit on top. And I don't want this very thick. So I'm just going to roll it out so it's a few millimeters in thickness. Now I don't want the underneath of this to get messed up. So I'm actually going to pop down a piece of parchment paper. I'm then going to cover that in some of that sugar glue, just so that the fondant will stick to the bottom of my cake board, and trim that down. And I'm going to cover the whole thing in fondant. Now you could do it like we did on the base and create panels. I'm actually going to do the lid in one piece. I can then go in just smoothing it down, first with my paddle smoothers, especially on those corners, just making sure that I get nice sharp edges. I can then go in and just perfect this with the flexi smoothers. So now we've got our chocolate box, I can transfer this over onto my cake board, leaving enough space for that lid at the back. I'm going to pop down some ganache just to hold my cake in place and just transfer it over. Once the chocolate box is in place on my board, I can start laying out those heart chocolates. Now I want to make it look like my box of chocolates was wrapped in a ribbon. So I'm going to have a ribbon coming off from one corner of my cake box, and I'm going to have a ribbon and a bow on the top of my lid. So I'm sticking with the pink theme to match those sprinkles. So I've got some light pink fondant, and I'm actually going to add in just a small amount of Tylose powder. And all this is going to do is make that fondant set a little bit firmer. If you didn't have any Tylose powder, you could also use gum paste. It also allows you to roll that fondant a little bit thinner than you normally would. And I'm going to roll it out until it's a few millimeters in thickness. Now, so that all the pieces of my ribbon are the same width, I'm going to use a ruler as a guide. But before I cut my piece out, I want to add some texture to my ribbon. So I'm just going to use my Dresden tool, and I'm just going to run some lines. So I need my first piece just coming at an angle, and I'm just going to trim a little V and just add some movement. Now on the next piece, I need to add another diagonal line, and then pop that onto my cake board, and again just add movement into that ribbon. I'm then going to do exactly the same and create a strip of ribbon, but instead of this one going onto the bottom of my cake box, this one's going to be going onto my lid. Now the first thing I'm going to do is in the center, I just want to pull that together. This is because I want to have a bow on the top. So I've got another strip here, and I'm going to create two rectangles that are around 2.5 inches each, another little rectangle. I'm going to flip those over and add a little bit of edible glue, and I've got a small amount of tissue paper which I'm just going to lie over the top. I'm going to bring those over and just pull that together. Two halves to my bow, which I'm just going to stick together. Then I've got a small little piece which I'm just going to ruffle slightly. Just pull that center piece around just to give me a little bow. I can then lay my piece of ribbon over the corner of my chocolate box. Cut that in half so that the two ends can come out from behind the bow. Now, when I glue that ribbon onto the side, I'm going to use a flexi smoother just to push it slightly underneath and just cut that off. I'm then going to leave that to dry until that bow is set, so we can remove that tissue paper and add the top of my chocolate box onto the rest of my cake. Okay, so since attaching that ribbon, I've left it long enough that that has firmed up, and this has also given the fondant a little bit of time to firm up so that if I touch the lid, I'm not going to leave fingerprints. Now, I actually want to attach my chocolates to the box, and you could use some additional chocolate. I've actually got some royal icing, which I'm going to be using to attach the lid. So I'm just going to pop some of that underneath, just gluing those in place. I then want to attach my lid onto the board. Now I want to have it leaning at a slight angle, so it's going to be resting against the back of this cake. Now, because this top part is just fondant on its own, I'm going to be using a dowel just to hold it in place. So this is quite a strong, sturdy, thick plastic dowel, and I've just chosen a white one as the bottom of my chocolate box lid is white, so you're not going to be able to see it as much. Before I cut my dowel, I'm going to take the top of my cake and just place it on my board where I want it to go without leaning it up against that cake. And you can see where that cake is going to hit on the side of your chocolate box. So I know that I need my dowel to be just slightly taller than the back, and just chop it down. It's around 5 millimeters taller than the box. Okay, so I've cut that angle at the same angle that the lid is going to be sitting against the cake. So this means that the bottom of that lid, where we've got the board, is going to sit on the whole surface area of the top of my dowel rather than just sitting on a corner. So what I'm going to do is use some royal icing just up the side of that dowel, push that into the fondant that I've got on the board, and just push that dowel against the cake. So I've come in around 1 centimetre. I'm then going to place some royal icing on the top of my dowel. So we've got our dowel here. I'm then going to bring in my cake and just place that at an angle and just push that down to rest on that dowel. I'm then going to use some royal icing around the bottom of that lid, so where it joins onto my cake board, just around the bottom to hold it in place. Now, one thing that I would say is if you did want to create this cake and you needed to transport it, especially in a car, I would think about, just as you would with a tiered cake, adding that lid when you get to the venue, just because that dowel is on the outside, so you don't want any movement from the car to cause the lid to move. So here we have the finished cake that looks like a box of chocolates where that lid has just been slid off and it's revealing all those chocolates inside. I really hope you've enjoyed this video tutorial and will be able to use some of these techniques to make your own chocolate box cake. If you have enjoyed the video, as always, don't forget to give it a like, and if you'd like to see more videos like this and you haven't already, then don't forget you can subscribe to the Cake Spanning's YouTube channel. You can also hit that notification bell next to the subscribe button, and this will just alert you every time I upload a new video. So until next time, bye!